Hey everyone, Bible Nerd here. Every Tuesday on my Facebook page, I post trivia questions. So I thought it'd be fun to go through and answer those questions after the day is over. See how many you get right, see how many you get wrong. Check out my Facebook page at Bible Nerd. Every day I post something different. So I have a different theme for each day. You can check out the content there as well. But love to have you be a part of the Facebook page along with the YouTube channel. So check out my video for today and answer the questions that were posted today on Facebook. All right, let's do today's first trivia question. Moses' wife was a blank, was a what? He was not married. A. B. A Hebrew virgin. C. An Egyptian woman. Or D. A priest's daughter. Give you a few seconds to think about it. The answer is going to be in Exodus. That's where we have the story of Moses. And it's actually pretty early on in Exodus. So let's go to Exodus chapter 2, verse 16. And it says, Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. When the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. When they came to Reuel, their father, he said, Why have you come back so soon? So they said, An Egyptian delivered us from the hands of the shepherds. And what is more, he even drew the water for us and watered the flock. He said to his daughters, Where is he then? Why is it you left the man behind? Invite him to have something to eat. Moses was willing to dwell with the man, and he gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses. So this man had 7 daughters, and you can see back here in verse, too far back, in verse 16, that he was a priest of Midian. So Moses' wife was a priest's daughter. All right, let's go on to the next question. How long was the Feast of Booths or Tabernacles in the Bible? Was it A, 1 day, B, 7 days, C, 30 days, or D, 40 days and 40 nights? I'll let you think about it for a second. While you're thinking about it, let's go to Leviticus chapter 23. It's not a Bible study unless you throw Leviticus in there. I remember every year you do like the Bible in a year, and boy, you get kind of just humming along. Great stories in Leviticus would be like, oh boy. It was always the tough one. But the more I've actually read it, I've actually enjoyed Leviticus a lot more as I've just studied more of the Bible. But anyway, let's go to Leviticus chapter 23, starting in the 34th verse. Speak to the sons of Israel, saying, On the 15th of this 7th month is the Feast of Tabernacles or booths, depending on which translation you're looking at, for 7 days to the Lord. So the answer is B, 7 days. So the Feast of Tabernacles was one of the few celebrations where they were required to try to get back to Jerusalem. And part of that is they would stay in these makeshift tents or tabernacles or booths to remember the wanderings in the book of Numbers. So it's an idea to get away from the material things, kind of go back to the nomadic life, and to be able to do a bunch of these things in these little makeshift tents. They were supposed to be constructed in certain ways, supposed to be outside. Then they'd have certain things they would eat, certain days they wouldn't work during this 7-day festival. But it was really a fascinating celebration to get back to your roots, to get back to remembering what your ancestors went through. I think we have similar things in the country here where we do these remembrances of the people that traveled across the West. There's a lot of different things we do even in our country that celebrate, maybe not to quite the length and extent that the Israelite people have done for so many years. But I think that some of their festivals, some of their celebrations, and their remembrances are some of the best kept traditions in any culture in the world. So the Feast of Tabernacles or Feast of Booths is for 7 days, and it's just a wonderful celebration, wonderful reminder of what their ancestors went through. So the answer is B. All right, how are we doing so far? Ready for the next one? Which of Adam and Eve's sons was a keeper of sheep? Was it A, Cain, B, Seth, C, Abel, or D, Noah? Well, if we're talking Adam and Eve, we're going to the book of Genesis. So let's go to the front of your Bible. We're going to Genesis. Makes it easy. You can just shut it and then just open it. And bam, Genesis. Let's go to chapter 4. Now the man, this is Adam, had relations with his wife Eve, and she conceived and gave birth to Cain. And she said, I have begotten a man child from the help of the Lord. Again, she gave birth to his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of flocks, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. So that's an interesting side note here with the Cain and Abel story is there was a sacrifice that was asked of these men, and Cain gave of the land where Abel gave his sheep, and it looks as if that was more acceptable to the Lord, where Cain's offer didn't seem to be quite as acceptable. Maybe because it was easily to grow back. Maybe it wasn't all that he could give. Maybe it wasn't the first fruits. Maybe just the leftovers. Doesn't really say. But obviously, there's more of a permanence when you give up your first flock, your first um, in a sense of the pureness of it, the sense that there's only one time it's the first one, so it's the first flock. There's a more permanence to that offer than if it's just the weeds or the wheat or the stuff that can grow again. There's something of a permanence there. And then eventually, obviously, Cain takes offense to that his brother had somehow outdone him with this offer and ends up killing him for it. That may be one of the reasons. So the Cain and Abel story is a fascinating story because as it plays out through Genesis, you can see that the entire world has basically been this civil rivalry, the civil rivalry between family members. If you go back far enough, every war was a brother against a brother. And this just where it all kind of started within the human race, that there'd always be these fights among people. So you even see with Abraham, he had the two kids, you had Ishmael and Isaac. And you can see that even there was fighting between those family members, estranged family members. So it's amazing how when we're fighting against anybody, we're fighting against our brother, we're fighting against our sister. But we always must remember that we're not fighting against our brothers and sisters, we're fighting against the principalities of darkness, envy, pride, strife, lust. Those are the things we're really fighting for. So next time you want to get in a fight with somebody, one, realize they're an immortal being. Two, realize they are your brother and sister. And three, who are you really fighting? And maybe that'll help resolve your next conflict. So let's go on to the next question. But the answer to this one is C, Abel. All right, I got a fun one for you. This will be a little bit of a deep dive because we're going to jump into scriptures here a little bit more than the other questions, but I think this is a lot of fun. Other than himself, how many people did Jesus bring back to life? Was it A, 2, B, 3, C, 7, or D, 10? Now, if you're like me, the first one I think of is Lazarus. So, great, incredible story in John chapter 11, where he raises Lazarus from the grave, but not only the grave, but he's been in there for days. I mean, who knows what his condition, decomposition was like before they raised him. And there was a lot of things about the third day that it was even past that. So, he wasn't dead. He was really dead when he was raised from the grave. But was there any others? Can you think of any other stories in the Gospels where Jesus rose someone from the grave? Well, the answer is B. There's three of them. So let's go to each one of those real quick. The first one is in Luke chapter 7. So we've been in the New Testament or the Old Testament most of the trivia today. Now we're going to jump to New Testament trivia. We're going to go to Luke chapter 7. I'm reading out of the New American Standard, is what I'm reading out of today. Chapter 7, verse 11. Okay, Luke 7, starting in the 11th verse. Soon afterwards, he went to the city of Nain, and his disciples were going along with him, accompanied by a large crowd. Now, as he approached the gate of the city, a dead man was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And a sizable crowd from the city was with her. When the Lord saw her, he felt compassion for her and said to her, "Do not weep." And he came up and touched the coffin, and the bearers came to a halt. And he said, "Young man, I say to you, arise." The dead man sat up and began to speak, and Jesus gave him back to his mother. Wow. What an incredible story of him raising someone from the dead, literally going to be buried in the tomb in his coffin, heading to be buried. The next account is also in Luke chapter 8 in the 40th verse, so it's just a few pages ahead. This one is incredible because it's also the story of the woman with the issue of blood. So you actually have kind of a double miracle that's happening here. So let's start in the 40th verse in Luke chapter 8. Luke 8 chapter 8 verse 40. And the Lord returned, the people welcomed him, for they had been waiting a while. And there was a man named Jairus, and he was a official of the synagogue, and fell at Jesus' feet and began to implore him to come to his house, for he had only one daughter, about 11 years old, and she was dying. But as they went, the crowds were pressing against him. And a woman who had hemorrhaging or an issue of blood for 12 years and could not be healed by anyone, came up behind him and touched the fringe of his cloak, and immediately her hemorrhaging stopped. This story is beautifully told in The Chosen. If you watch that television, it's a television series, or it's a series on the chosen people, and they have a wonderful depiction of this in that series. I think it's an episode. I'm going to mess up the episode. I think it's the most recent season, but I tell you what, The Chosen is just incredible. So you have Jairus kind of getting Jesus to come with him, and as he's going through the crowds and trying to get to this home, he runs into this woman that touches the fringe of his cloak. Listen to what he says after this. Let's see. And Jesus said, "Who is the one who touched me?" And while they were all denying it, Peter said, "Master, the people are crowding and pressing on you." But Jesus said, "Someone did touch me, for I was aware that power had gone out of me." When the woman saw that she had not escaped notice, she came trembling and fell down before him and declared in the presence of all the people the reason why she had touched him. And they knew and how she became immediately healed. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." Just a beautiful story. It's one of the beautiful stories. And I tell you, that depiction in The Chosen is just absolutely incredible. So then they eventually make it to the daughter. They have this incredible interaction here. So they get done with the streets there with the lady with the issue of blood, how she is healed. And you have to remember, having an issue of blood made you unbelievably unclean. That if you came into contact with any kind of blood during a woman's natural cycle, there were certain things. They couldn't be in the same bed, they couldn't sit on the same stool. They had a lot of different rules during that time when she was going through that cleansing. So if this woman constantly bled, man, there's so many things that would have limited her life. And I think The Chosen did an incredible job of depicting that. So let's keep reading to the Jairus' daughter who gets actually raised from the dead. While he was still speaking, someone came from the house of the synagogue official saying, "Your daughter has died. Do not trouble the teacher anymore." So this is the priest talking to Jairus, who's bringing Jesus. But when Jesus heard this, he answered him, "Do not be afraid any longer. Only believe, and she will be made well." When he came into the house, he did not allow anyone to enter with him except Peter and James and John, and the girl's father and mother. Now they were all weeping and lamenting for her, but he said, "Stop weeping, for she has not died, but is only asleep." And they began laughing at him, knowing that she had actually died. He, however, took her by the hand and called, saying, "Child, arise." And her spirit returned, and she got up immediately. And he gave orders for something to be given to her to eat. Just an incredible story. And you see this reference right here. The New Testament even kind of mentions this idea of falling asleep and is your death, and that when you're resurrected, you're brought back into a new life, and you're brought back to being alive and not sleeping anymore. So there's often this phrase of people just falling asleep. So I think that's kind of interesting there as well. But just beautiful depictions of those. One more, we've got to do it. I mean, Lazarus is the big one that we all, I think, when we think about Jesus raising someone from the grave, I think the Lazarus story is probably the one I think of first, probably more than anything else, other than Jesus rising himself from the grave. So let's go on to chapter 11. Now, a certain man was sick, Lazarus from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord, who anointed and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. So the sister sent word to him, saying, "Lord, behold, to whom you love is sick." But when Jesus heard this, he said, "This sickness is not to end in death, but for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified by it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he then stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Such an interesting such an interesting little tidbit there. Then after this he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and you are going back there again." Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles, because his light is not in him." This he said, and after that he said to them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go so they may waken him up out of his sleep." The disciples then said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover." Now, Jesus was speaking of his death, but they thought he was speaking of literal sleep. So Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I'm glad for your sakes that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. Therefore, Thomas, who was called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, Let us go so that we may die with him. So when Jesus came, he found that he was already been in the tomb 4 days. Now think about this. I mean, he's wrapped in probably ceremonial clothing, grave clothes. He's wrapped in this stuff to be able to help with the decomposition. So they anoint his body with different stuff to help kind of that process and just to maybe eliminate some of the smell. There's also some maybe not to attract the bugs and other things while he's going through that decomposition. So 4 days, that is dead, dead. I mean, that's not sleep. He's not waking up. I mean, he is really, really dead. To this point, who knows how much decomposition's already happened. Now, Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. Martha, therefore, when she heard that Jesus was coming, went to meet him, but Mary stayed at the house. Martha then said to Jesus, Lord, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died. That's some incredible faith right there. That he was sick. They knew that he was the Messiah. They knew he could heal. They had seen it. So I think this is a great testament to that. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Wow. Boy, if that doesn't send tingles. Who would believe in me? He who believes in me will live even if he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, even he who comes into the world. When she had said this, she went away and called Mary, her sister, saying secretly, The teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard this, she got up quickly and was coming to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still a far way off, or was still in a place where Martha met him. Then the Jews who were with her in the house and consoling her, when they saw that Mary got up quickly and went out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Therefore, when Mary came where Jesus was, she saw him and fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Then Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping. He was deeply moved in spirit and was troubled. And he said, Where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Then we have the shortest verse in Scripture, John chapter 11, verse 35. 2 words, Jesus wept. Just beautiful. So the Jews were saying, See how he loved him. But some of them said, Could not this man have opened the eyes of the blind, not have kept this man from dying? So Jesus, again, being deeply moved within, came to the tomb. Now it was a cave, and the stone was lying against it. Jesus said, Remove the stone. Martha, the sister of the deceased, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be stench, for he has been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, Did I not say to you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they removed the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but because of the people standing around, I said it so that you may believe, so they may believe that you sent me. Then he said these words. He cried out in a loud voice, the most powerful voice. I mean, I it's just beautiful. He cried out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. The man who'd been dead came forth, bound hand and foot with wrappings, and his face was wrapped around with a cloth. Jesus said, Unbind him and let him go. So the answer to this is B3. Just incredible stories of the miracles that Jesus performed. And I tell you what, if all the miracles were performed, were written in a book, it would fill the entire world. But I'm amazed at what we've been able to capture and some of the stories that we're able to read about this Messiah, about my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. All right, we're on to our last trivia question for today. What did Paul call Satan in Second Corinthians? Was it A, the father of lies, B, the prince of the power of the air, or C, the great dragon, or D, the God of this world. Now, you may recognize some of these titles because they all are titles that are given to Satan throughout the scriptures. The first one, A, the father of lies, is in John chapter 8, verse 44. There's also some mentions of it in Peter, not quite the same phrasing. It's mentioned throughout the New Testament, the father of lies. B is the prince of the power of the air. This is also a letter by Paul, but it's written in Ephesians 2, chapter 2. The next one, the great dragon, the great serpent. It's mentioned even both ways in Revelation chapter 12, verse 8. But our answer for Second Corinthians, a letter that Paul wrote, is D, the God of this world. So let's actually go and read that passage. I think it's pretty interesting. So let's go to Second Corinthians. You got the Gospels, you've got Romans, then you got First and Second Corinthians. So let's go to Corinthians chapter, a little too far, chapter 4. All right. So let's start in the first verse. In those cases, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelieving, so they might not see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. So that's where it's mentioned there. It's an incredible story in Corinthians, Second Corinthians there. But the answer to our last trivia question for the day is D, the God of this world. Well, how fun was that? Trivia Tuesday. So check out my Facebook page at Bible Nerd. I post different things every day. I have themes for each day. Monday is motivational or quote Mondays. I'll put a bunch of quotes up. Tuesday is Trivia Tuesday. Wednesday is usually tied to music. So I'll post music videos or things that are really inspiring on Christian music and things like that. Thursday, I usually do a Thankful Thursday. So I have all these challenges and stuff throughout the day that's a lot of fun. And then Friday, I have a discussion or a topic that I'll bring up and just get some interaction, get some people talking back and forth. So it's really a lot of fun. Love where this is going. I love that you're a part of it. Please click subscribe, like, and comment. Let me know what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong. I just love going on this journey with you and can't wait to see where God takes us. So I hope you have a wonderful day and God bless.